It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons.
A high-profile resignation in Ottawa. The Speaker in the House of Commons steps down following days of controversy. Good evening. The resignation came amid mounting pressure from opposition critics and even colleagues.
The condemnation coming after Anthony Rota honored a man in Parliament who once fought for the Nazis. CTV's national correspondent Judy Trinh has tonight's top story.
It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons.
Anthony Rota called being Speaker his biggest honour, but his actions brought disrepute to Parliament.
The work of this House is above any of us.
Last Friday, the Speaker recognized a 98-year-old Ukrainian veteran from his riding, not knowing that Yaroslav Hunka fought with a Nazi unit during the Second World War.
What happened was completely unacceptable and a really damaging event for communities in Canada, particularly our Jewish community, and around the world, particularly for our friends in Ukraine.
Rota made 2 apologies, insufficient for the diplomatic landmine he set off, calling Hunka a hero with Ukraine's Jewish president, Vladimir Zelensky, in the House.
This is, by far, the biggest hit Canada's diplomatic reputation has ever taken in its history. And it happened under Justin Trudeau's watch.
Hunka was part of the SS Galician, a military unit that killed thousands of Jewish and Polish people. Today on social media, Poland's education minister called for Hunka to be extradited and tried for war crimes, a position the NDP leader supports.
Anyone involved with Nazis should be held to account, and that is an appropriate action. And with the case of an extradition, it should be done following the rule of law.
So far, the Prime Minister has only made brief remarks on the matter.
As I said yesterday, this was deeply embarrassing for the House and for Canada.
Jewish advocacy groups are demanding more from the government.
I think an apology from the Prime Minister is an important step. I think it's also important that there be an investigation, a hearing through a parliamentary committee to really understand how this could have happened.
With Rota's resignation, parliamentarians will vote for a new speaker on Thursday. It's only the 3rd time since Confederation that a speaker has been replaced mid-session. Judy Trinh, CTV News, Ottawa.
And still to come, a significant scene of security at Queen's Park. A major police presence, road closures, and restricted access to the legislative grounds. The reason for the precautions, plus the political drama that unfolded inside. Those stories coming up.
But first, we're live over Highway 400, the scene of a recent case of brazen stunt driving. How many times have you experienced speeding motorcycles race by you, roaring and weaving through traffic? This scene played out over the weekend. It ended in a crash, and it was all caught on dashboard camera. Police say it happens far too often, and they want to put a stop to it. CTV's John Musselman joins us live with the details. John.
Well, Michelle, it's a situation that police say not only puts the motorcyclists in danger, but also other drivers on the road. This video was captured by a dash camera. Watch the left of your screen. 2 motorcycles speed past and weave through traffic. Now watch on the right side. A 3rd motorcycle speeds by. Police say they are going at dangerously high speeds. A motorist heading south on the 400 near the 407 captured this on his dash cam on Saturday afternoon. A few seconds later, as the motorist heads west onto the 407, he comes across an accident involving one of the motorcycles. OPP say the 34-year-old survived the crash with non-life-threatening injuries. He's since been charged with stunt driving.
We talk about the leading causes of death and injury on our highways, and I can tell you, speeding continues to be the #1 killer of the big 4.
Take a look at these provincial numbers. Stunt driving is up 20% this year, 4,395 charges laid. Road fatalities in 2023, 263. 34 were motorcyclists.
We've laid about 107,000 speeding tickets already this year. We continue to focus on the big four: speeding, aggressive driving, impaired driving, distracted driving, and people not wearing their seatbelts.
The injured motorcyclist is now facing a 30-day license suspension. No other vehicles were involved in this collision. And it appears that the motorcyclist lost control as he was taking the ramp onto the 407, and police say it was a direct result of that speed. Reporting live, I'm John Musselman. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, John. We turn to stunning revelations into the cause of a train derailment in Toronto.
The Scarborough RT went off the rails in July. 5 people were injured. Today, one TTC board member said, quote, rusty bolts and political dysfunction were to blame. CTV's Natalie Johnson joins us live with the story. Natalie.
Hi, Raheem. The TTC CEO said this afternoon that knowing what he knows now, he believes that they made the right decision to shut down the SRT when they did. The investigation found no problems with the trains or the tracks, but it was the anchor bolts that failed the night of the derailment. Scarborough transit takers stuck waiting for the bus say shuttles do little to replace the failed SRT.
I think they could probably maybe put in a few more buses.
When we had the RT, it was faster to get to Kennedy Station.
The RT was shut down for good last month after it derailed in July, injuring 5 people. The investigation took weeks, and now staff reveal what sent the train off the tracks.
We know that ultimately it is some bolts that came loose, all right, holding down the power rails.
Failed reaction rail anchor bolts were behind the derailment that saw car 3001 separate from the rest of the train after it departed southbound from Ellesmere on July 24th.
It's 38 years old. The design life was 25. We've talked a lot in the past about state of good repair, needing funding, and unfortunately, we've closed it and shut it down.
The reason that it derailed was not just rusty old bolts, but because the political process derailed years ago.
Investigators say despite safety checks every 72 hours, the broken or loose bolts would have been very difficult to observe visually prior to the failure.
It doesn't seem to me that there was a failure with respect to checking the overall safety of the system.
If you buy a car and you drive it and it's got a 15-year lifetime and you're still driving it when it's 25 years old, it's just not going to be as reliable no matter how careful your mechanics are.
Some Scarborough residents say the system never should have been allowed to fail in the first place.
I think they need to be better prepared.
More attention to detail. It should have never happened. It should have been taken care of before.
What is to blame here beyond the bolts?
So what I'm going to tell you is, we've continued to talk at the TTC about the state of good repair. We've been messaging the $12 billion of unfunded need to maintain the existing state. And this is another example of it.
The Scarborough subway that is slated to replace the route won't be ready until at least 2030. So what about the rest of Toronto Transit? Are there concerns that this type of bolt could fail on other lines? Officials say this type of reaction rail is not used in other parts of the TTC. The CEO stressing just a few minutes ago that he wants the public to know that the system is safe. Reporting live in Scarborough, I'm Natalie Johnson. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. And we are expecting an update tomorrow on another controversial transit project. Metrolinx officials are set to speak about the progress of the Crosstown Light Rail. A news conference has been called for Wednesday afternoon. Construction on the $5.5 billion transit project began in 2011 and was supposed to be up and running in the year 2020. But 3 years later, and we're yet to hear a definitive opening date.
Also ahead tonight, the push to increase parking penalties in Toronto, when the fines are cheaper than paying for a spot, and the impact it's having on drivers.
But right now, let's have a live look outside as this long stretch of dry, warm weather continues. Plenty of sun today, above seasonal temperatures, despite being one of the cooler days this week. Beautiful shot of our skyline. Lindsay Morrison is here with a look at the current conditions. A bit of wind in the mix, but likely not many complaints today.
And I don't think there will be many complaints tomorrow or the day after that, Michelle. In some parts of the province, there is a little bit of cloud. That's specifically in southwest Ontario. A couple of showers there, too. But in our neck of the woods, we've had beautiful clearing, and it's looking like a lovely evening. We do have strong winds that are coming directly out of the east. You may notice that the closer you are to the shoreline of Lake Ontario. Gusts near 40 kilometers per hour still at this hour. Temperature-wise, we're nice and comfortable, 18 degrees here locally, and it's looking like a mild evening. These temperatures are warmer than normal when it comes to overnight lows, and wait until you see the long-range forecast. We'll talk about how hot it's going to get and where's all the rain. Just how dry it's been this September we'll discuss as well. For now, Michelle, back to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Well, we want to warn you about the graphic details in our next story. For the first time, we're learning about some of the allegations facing former fashion mogul Peter Nygard, and the details are disturbing.
Opening arguments began today in a sex assault trial where lawyers argued he used his status in the industry to lure younger women to the company's headquarters here in Toronto. CTV's John Woodward is covering the case and joins us outside the courtroom. John.
Raheem, Crown prosecutors say that Nygaard built a private bedroom on the 5th floor of his Toronto headquarters, and that was the site of the sexual assaults at issue in this case. The prosecutors say Nygaard brought 5 women to that room who did not realize what they were getting into until the doors locked. Peter Nygard's Toronto headquarters on Niagara Street were the site of countless parties for the Canadian fashion mogul, whose brand and company were household names from its base in Winnipeg to an enclave in the Bahamas. But inside the Toronto headquarters, Crown prosecutors allege was a private bedroom. Attorney Anna Serbin told the jury within these walls there was a bedroom suite with a giant bed and jacuzzi, a bar and doors with no handles with automatic locks, keypad-operated locks. Locks controlled by Peter Nygard. The women ranged in age from 16 to 28. 2 were offered a job, 1 tickets to the Rolling Stones. All ended up in that private bedroom, the Crown said. In 2005, when Nygard was 63, Serbin said the 16-year-old was disoriented after a drink and woke up as she was assaulted in the bedroom. On the way out, a woman gives her some pills, Serbin said. The woman directs her to take all the pills. The pills are Plan B, emergency contraceptives.
Full of friends and love.
Nygard is now 82. He entered a courtroom in a wheelchair. A Toronto special constable helped him to his seat. He has pleaded not guilty. His lawyer, Brian Greenspan, questioned another witness about architectural details in the bedroom.
The primary evidence is going to come from the complainants and the alleged victims themselves. They're going to testify and they're going to paint a narrative that in the Crown's eyes shows that he was an individual who committed multiple sexual assaults against multiple victims.
Victims, the Crown says, will testify about what happened in that room. The court also heard from a former contractor of Nygaard who described his expensive vehicles and tastes. The contractor also described how that digital locking system worked. Reporting live, I'm John Woodward. Raheem, back to you.
Thank you, John. And you can read more about the case and the arguments presented today on our website, ctvnewstoronto.ca. We turned a significant scene of security, a major police presence at Queen's Park this morning.
Officers weren't taking any chances, shutting down roads downtown after gathering intelligence a disruption demonstration was headed for the legislature. CTV's Beth McDonnell joins us live with the details. Beth.
Michelle, it's still not clear just how big this protest might have been. Some of the blocking vehicles and police officers still seem to be here on standby. Toronto police tonight aren't saying much about the situation, calling it intelligence related. Toronto police say the blockades were mounted overnight, and in the morning, a huge police presence was revealed. Police cruisers, buses, and garbage trucks all used to stop a potential demonstration from descending downtown involving a vehicle convoy.
I'm not going to speculate on the number of vehicles. I'm not able to at this time. We just have reason to believe that they're intending to block roads and infrastructure.
Officers say the action was planned by a group called Save the Children. Online, it talks about supporting the well-being of children and says indoctrination in schools and bodily autonomy are unacceptable. For over 5 hours, traffic was diverted away from Queen's Park and Hospital Row, although pedestrians were allowed in and out of the perimeter. Police say the protests didn't end up happening, saying it will continue to monitor, assess, and act upon the latest credible information. God created these children. Last week on 2 days in Toronto, there were protests and counter-protests around sexual orientation and gender identity education in schools.
one outside a school, another coming to Queen's Park, which had more than 1,000 people take part under the banner 1 Million March for Children. There were some protests today at Queen's Park. It was day 2 of a demonstration against private health care, as yesterday the Jewish community celebrated Yom Kippur, with nurses calling for hospitals to perform procedures on nights and weekends.
Let the doctors, the nurses, and the others that work in ORs and in recovery rooms to operate after hours in a not-for-profit basis. That's the solution.
Indigenous groups from Northern Ontario also traveled to speak out about mining development concerns. Some say they've been asking for a meeting with the Premier for close to a year.
It would be devastating. It would destroy our way of life, meaning the freedom, the peaceful nature that we have around there.
Both the healthcare and mining demonstrations were held on schedule soon after police began lifting the roadblocks. The blockades began before 5 a.m. but were lifted around 11:30 a.m. Reporting live at Queen's Park, I'm Beth McDonnell. Back to Raheem and Michelle.
Thank you, Beth. And there were plenty of fireworks inside at Queen's Park. Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris joins us live with those details. Siobhan.
Well, Raheem, the opposition leader had a whole barrage of questions for the Premier, very pointed this time around a trip to Vegas that CTV News told you about last week. Now Marit Stiles wants a new investigation into that trip that involved political staff, a developer, and a former cabinet minister. A long way from the Vegas Strip, the opposition leader grilled the Premier on a trip to Sin City that's been tangled up in Greenbelt investigations and cost 2 people their jobs.
When did he first find out that his minister was living it up in Vegas? Can the Premier explain how 3 different people could mistakenly give the wrong date? What steps is the Premier taking to figure out who paid for this trip and when?
On that trip, a now resigned minister and 2 aides to the Premier. They told the Integrity Commissioner they bumped into a developer who since had land pulled from the Greenbelt. But employees of the Wynn Hotel tell CTV News 3 of them had massages at the same time.
Should the people of Ontario accept that government policy was being decided on a massage table in Vegas?
The Integrity Commissioner's office says the people on the trip have corrected their dates.
It is not a joke. Because what has happened in the province of Ontario under 15 years of Liberals and NDPs is that we have a housing crisis.
The Premier deflected the questions put directly to him.
The Integrity Commissioner cleared myself, cleared my office. The Auditor General cleared myself and cleared my office. Our intent is to build homes.
The Integrity Commissioner feels it's more likely than not that someone tipped developer Shakir Rahmatullah off about Greenbelt changes. He just couldn't say who. New Democrats think the trip needs another look.
We are pulling together all the evidence to prepare another request to the Integrity Commissioner.
The interim Liberal leader says there's a lot more to dig into.
They don't want to talk about what happened in Vegas or what happened with the Greenbelt or what happened with MZOs or urban boundaries in Ottawa and Hamilton.
Opposition parties want the Auditor General to look at the expansion of urban boundaries where people connected to the Premier have benefited. Marit Stiles had been hoping to compel the Speaker to get 2 developers who benefited from the Greenbelt deal to testify here at Queen's Park. She'd need the support of all MPPs to do that, and she didn't get it. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. York Regional Police have launched an initiative aimed at combating high-end auto thefts.
We need your help to prevent auto theft. So we're asking for you to take proactive steps and safeguard your vehicles.
Operation Auto Guard encourages vehicle owners to install security cameras and use anti-theft devices. Thousands of Faraday bags have also been distributed, which block signals from duplicated key fobs. Police say they have seen an almost 50% increase in vehicle thefts compared to this time last year. And to the cost of parking illegally now in Toronto. What if the fine is actually cheaper than the parking spot itself?
It's why there's a push to increase penalties, meaning you could be paying more if you find that dreaded yellow ticket on your windshield. CTV's Sean Leithong explains.
At some pay parking lots in the city, the price to park is more than the price of a parking ticket. But the city is aiming to change that.
I can understand that. Sometimes I feel the same way where I'm like, it's going to charge me $40 to park anyways
forget it. Like, why waste the time? Just take the ticket.
Currently, a standard fine for parking infraction is $30, but at places like Exhibition Place, pay parking for major events is between $30 and $45. Councillor Paul Ainsley says the city hopes to get fines up to $75.
If you're not paying for a $45 fee to go to an event, you should be appropriately penalized, which is why we raised it to $75.
The fines won't cover street parking, but could cover city and private lots along with TTC parking.
The goal of the parking violation notice is to discourage the illegal practice of parking a vehicle without consent.
Don Boyle, CEO of Exhibition Place, says they're changing their parking from paying at the gate to entirely app-based.
Because we're going from a gate-attended with barrier parking to a more free, frictionless, it's important that on that honor system that we have a way to be able to enforce it.
Some members of the public say that fines shouldn't be going up.
I can understand where they're coming from that, but I think they should lower the price of the parking in general, right? If you're already spending that much to be at a football game, you spend the money on the drinks. We know how it is.
Raising parking ticket prices right now is not something that people will tolerate.
It's everyone's responsibility to pay for their parking spot fairly, and that's a community and citizen obligation. However, it sounds like when you're doubling the price on a penalty, it sounds very punitive to me.
The changes will be presented to the General Government Committee next Monday. Regardless of whether you see this as a cash grab or a necessary closing of a loophole, the changes could be effective as early as December 1st. Sean Leathong, CTV News.
In BC, a procession was held today for a fallen hero. Fellow officers showed their respect for RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien as his body was taken from the Abbotsford Hospital to a funeral home. The 7-year veteran was fatally shot on Friday while executing a search warrant in a community east of Vancouver. A 25-year-old man has been charged with first-degree murder.
A new report from Food Banks Canada calls for a collective effort by all levels of government in tackling poverty and food insecurity. The group says more than 42% of Canadians feel financially worse off compared to last year. More than 18% are experiencing food insecurity, and almost 30% are coping with an inadequate standard of living. Ontario received a D- grade for its approach to poverty reduction. It was one of 8 provinces that got D+ or worse. The report concludes an overall lack of action on affordable housing and improving social assistance is the main factor in the struggle against food insecurity and poverty.
Contract talks began in Toronto today as GM workers at 3 Ontario facilities seek a new deal. The 4,300 employees are at the Oshawa Assembly Complex, the St. Catharines Powertrain Plant, and the Woodstock Parts Distribution Centre. The bargaining comes on the heels of a new agreement with Ford. That contract includes wage hikes, pension and benefit improvements, and special EV transition measures. The union is hoping to use that deal as a blueprint for the talks with GM.
In Detroit, Joe Biden visited a UAW picket line today, showing his support during the widening U.S. auto strike.
You saved the automobile industry back in 2008 and before. Made a lot of sacrifices, gave up a lot, and the companies were in trouble. But now they're doing incredibly well. And guess what? You should be doing incredibly well, too.
Biden has repeatedly argued that auto companies have not gone far enough to meet union demands. The strike has been going for 12 days now and expanded into 20 states last week. The White House says Biden is the first modern president to visit a picket line.
The man Biden could face in next year's presidential election was found liable for fraud today. A judge in Manhattan ruled Donald Trump and his business committed fraud for years while building his real estate empire. Prosecutors alleged banks and insurers were deceived when Trump's assets were overvalued and his net worth exaggerated. The ruling is part of a civil lawsuit brought by New York's Attorney General.
He has completed almost 10,000 jumps in his career, but perhaps none quite like this one. Max Manow is the first person to detach from a paraglider midair and wingsuit fly past a world-famous castle in his native Germany. The skydiver performed a 100-meter free fall before zooming past the castle at a top speed of 200 kilometers per hour. And the 34-year-old built his own equipment for this flight. Wingsuit flights usually take place from an aircraft or from a high point, such as a building or a bridge.
I'm Mike Walker outside the Rogers Centre, where the Blue Jays open their final homestand of the regular season, which will determine their postseason fate. Coming up, we'll have more details on the Blue Jays' magic number.
And I'm Pat Foran. Coming up on Consumer Alert, as the temperatures get cooler, you may be thinking of a trip down south. If you're planning one, don't forget travel medical insurance. A Muskoka woman was in hospital in Florida, and her family got a bill for almost $125,000 U.S. I'll have my report just ahead.
So the last time we had measurable rain here in Toronto was 2 weeks ago. So far in September, we've had less than 10 millimeters total. Picture this, on average, we usually see about 75 millimeters of rain, and there isn't any measurable rain in our forecast. There is, however, a very hot start to the month of October. We're going to take you through the 7-day forecast coming up, and stay with us. We've got another full night of great shows for you right here on CTV.
Snowbirds will soon be thinking about heading south, and maybe even you're planning a sunny getaway this fall or winter.
When you leave Canada, you should always have travel medical insurance, and be sure you understand the plan that you've signed up for. Pat Foran explains on Consumer Alert. Pat.
Thanks, Michelle and Raheem. It's important to have travel insurance once you leave the country to cover any hospital bills or in case you need a medical flight home. But if you have any pre-existing health problems, your coverage could be canceled when you need it most. Cynthia Tyrell lived in Muskoka with her husband, Steve McMillan. She had a career as a social worker helping families and was featured on CTV News in Barrie.
There's a growing need for children's mental health services in Muskoka and across the province, in fact.
Tyrell was diagnosed with cancer in 2019. She underwent various treatments, but in March of 2022, she felt well enough to go to Florida for a vacation.
The doctor said, once after this radiation treatment, you're feeling okay, away you go. And she wanted to get into the sun and enjoy herself, so we went.
But when Tyrell got to Florida, her condition grew worse. She was hospitalized and eventually needed a medical flight back to Canada.
She spent 10 days in the hospital, and they airlifted her back to Simcoe.
Tyrell passed away not long after returning home. The couple had travel insurance, but because Tyrell was being treated for cancer, her claim was denied. McMillan got a bill saying he owes almost $125,000 U.S. for the flight and hospital bill.
It's quite a bit of money, so I'm just not sure what to do.
The policy was through Green Shield, and a spokesperson said, "We can confirm all claim decisions involve multiple levels of review with both internal claims examiners and external medical experts."
You have to know what the stability clause is of your contract.
Martin Firestone, a travel insurance expert, says most policies have a stability clause, and if you're being treated for any health issue, even a change in medication can be enough to void your claim.
If you've had any of those things, doctor visits, hospital visits, complaints of any sort, they basically rule you out for any chance of a claim being paid.
McMillan says he doesn't know how he'll pay the huge bill.
They're not aggressively chasing me yet, but I'm sure it's going to ramp up.
And Firestone says anyone with a huge out-of-country medical bill can try to negotiate a lower amount. And he says if you're unwell or have health problems, you may want to consider staying home. On your side, I'm Pat Foran.
If you have a consumer story idea, email us at alert@ctv.ca.
Well, it's a bit breezy today, a little bit choppy on the waters, but I don't think anyone's complaining for this time of year. It's still a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day, and it is just gorgeous. I mean, I don't know, and it's continuing day after day after day. And I think what's really surprising is what's coming our way next week.
Yeah, if you think this is beautiful, I'm curious to know what you think about typically July temperatures in the month of October, because that is what appears to be coming. Yeah, that camera bouncing around with that easterly wind out there and the waves being picked up on Lake Ontario too. It has been a windy day, but it's also been pleasant. If you're waiting for rain, I think you're going to be waiting a little bit longer. Weather is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train. Right now we have temperatures in the 20s just about everywhere in parts of northern Ontario, in the teens across southern Ontario. Nice and comfortable in Toronto at this hour. 18 is our current temperature, and we're forecasting a low near 13 overnight tonight, still warmer than normal. We have seen a bit of an increase in cloud cover in some areas. Partly cloudy skies are expected overnight, and then tomorrow, a little bit of a rinse and repeat situation. We will have a mix of sun and cloud, a little bit of cloud to start off the day, followed by some clearing. Afternoon high of 20 degrees. And yes, that east wind is still going to be with us too, maybe gusting to around 40 kilometers per hour at the height of the day. If it's garbage or recycling day in your neighborhood, just make sure those bins are secured. Here's a look at our current satellite and radar. Not much to show you here. There is a low pressure system stateside that's, as it rotates and is really stuck in place, it's going to bring some parts of southwestern Ontario a few showers, but for us, this blocking high means a lack of wet weather. Generally speaking, loads of sunshine, and as a ridge starts to build in a little later in the week, then we're going to be talking about the heat. Here is our forecast radar. Tomorrow, again, some cloud to start things off, clearing into the afternoon. It's looking quite nice. Into Thursday, another dry day for us. There's some wet weather for our friends in Windsor and over towards Sarnia, but the blue skies, yeah, they're going to continue for us. It looks like Friday is going to be a mostly sunny day with a high of 20 degrees. Then let's talk about the weekend. Things are going to start to warm up. 22 degrees for your Saturday. We welcome October on Sunday. Look at that forecast daytime high, 25, and it only gets hotter from there. 27 degrees potentially on Monday. Some communities might climb even higher than that. Relatively cooler for Tuesday, but some models indicate that that warmth looks to continue for maybe the next 10 days or maybe even the first full week of the new month. That's your look at the weather for now. Michelle, I'll send it over to you.
Did you ever have an event that was canceled for no reason of your own and you've always wanted to do a do-over? Well, now there's a new TV show that's giving people the opportunity to do just that. I'm Andrea Case. That story coming up on CTV News.
One of the biggest TV stars of the 1960s has died. Scottish actor David McCallum was known for playing a Russian spy on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., a role which earned him an Emmy nomination. Decades later, he won over a new generation of fans for his role in the NCIS series. McCallum died yesterday, surrounded by his family, just a week after his 90th birthday.
In Hollywood, a tentative deal in the writer's strike is expected to be voted on today. Union members will cast their ballots later this week. But first, governing boards of the Writers Guild of America are having their say. Details of the agreement with TV and movie studios have not been made public, but the WGA has described the deal as exceptional. The writers have been off the job since May 2nd.
Meanwhile, striking actors have voted to expand their walkout. It will now include the video game market. 98% voted in favor of the move if ongoing negotiations are not successful. The decision could put pressure on studios to make a deal with the performers who provide voices and stunts for games.
Big news tonight for Swifties worldwide. Taylor Swift has revealed on social media that the documentary film about her current tour is going global. It will be shown in theaters worldwide starting on October 13th. The initial announcement only mentioned a North American release. The pop star brings her billion-dollar Eras tour to Toronto for 6 shows at Rogers Centre in November 2024.
And Swift is on a break right now until her tour resumes next month. So she had time on the weekend to take in some football.
11th play of the drive. Mahomes lofting end zone. There it is. A touchdown to Kelsey.
The multi-Grammy Award winner was invited to Sunday's Kansas City Chiefs game by All-Pro tight end Travis Kelce. Well, that same day, surprise, surprise, sales of his jersey jumped nearly 400%. Rumors have been swirling for months about a possible romance between the two. No comment from either on the weekend, but they were seen leaving the game together.
Stars Tonight is brought to you by Lastman's Bad Boy. Who's better? Nobody.
This has made you a target.
5 crucial questions to expose the truth. Who's at risk?
Your life is in danger. Yeah, it is.
What needs to change?
He made a mistake. That's stunning.
When will justice be done?
The horrible nightmare. This can't be true.
Where's the proof?
Forensic evidence always tells the truth.
Why did this happen? One team uncovers the stories that need to be told.
Canadians should be very concerned.
Watch W5 at a new day and time this October on CTV.
It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons.
Updating our top stories, Anthony Rota stepped down today after inviting a man who turned out to have fought for the Nazis to speak in Parliament. There were growing calls for Rota to resign, including from within his own party.
We talk about the leading causes of death and injury on our highways, and I can tell you, speeding continues to be the #1 killer of the Big Four.
One of 3 motorcyclists caught on camera speeding has been charged with stunt driving. He later crashed and suffered non-life-threatening injuries on Saturday. Stunt driving charges are up 20% this year.
We know that ultimately it is some bolts that came loose, all right, holding down the power rail.
That's what the TTC says caused the Scarborough RT to derail in July. 5 people were injured when a car separated from the rest of the train. The service was permanently shut down last month, and a replacement subway won't be ready until at least 2030. Remember to keep up to date day and night through our website, that's ctvnewstoronto.ca, and by downloading the CTV News app.
To business now, and a new report suggests demand for fossil fuels will peak by the end of this decade. The International Energy Agency says that will be the case even if no new government climate policies are introduced between now and then. BNN Bloomberg's Jacqueline Hansen reports.
Thanks to more renewable power, electric vehicles, and heat pumps, the International Energy Agency says global demand for fossil fuels will peak by 2030. As a result, the IEA suggests no new oil and gas extraction projects, coal mines, or mine extensions are needed anywhere in the world. However, IEA says the clean energy transition is still happening slowly. It suggests trillions of dollars of investment are needed in clean energy in order to achieve net zero by 2050. Meanwhile, a new survey of economists by Bloomberg suggests the Bank of Canada is finished hiking interest rates. Economists expect the central bank to hold rates near the current level of 5% until at least the third quarter of next year. Fast forward until the start of 2025, and they anticipate interest rates will be at about 3.5%. And weakening consumer demand is having ripple effects in Canada's largest port. The number of shipping containers passing through the port of Vancouver fell sharply in the first half of this year. Vancouver's Port Authority says container volumes fell 14% compared with the year before. It also says the 2-week strike by BC dock workers in July took a toll on operations. Let's take a look at some of the closing market numbers for today. The Canadian dollar is trading lower about 1/3 cent to a little under 74 cents U.S. West Texas Intermediate oil gained about 70 cents to a touch over $90 U.S. a barrel. And Western Canadian Select gained about $1 to roughly $72 U.S. a barrel. As for stock markets, the TSX tumbled 244 points to end the day at 19,556.15. That is the latest in business. I'm Jacqueline Hansen of BNN Bloomberg.
Amazon is being sued in the U.S. following a years-long investigation. The antitrust lawsuit was filed by the Federal Trade Commission and joined by 17 states. It alleges the e-commerce giant uses its position in the marketplace to inflate prices on other platforms, overcharge sellers, as well as stifle competition. Amazon insists the lawsuit is wrong on the facts and the law. Well, the Dome is open at the Rogers Centre, and it's a big night for fans of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Hopes of making it into the playoffs are up in the air with a crucial few games ahead. Our Mike Walker joins us live with the details right outside Rogers Centre. Mike.
Well, Michelle, Raheem, the Blue Jays currently have the second wildcard spot and just 6 games remaining in the regular season. And in order to clinch that playoff spot, they must win 3 games.
All right. Let's go, Blue Jays! Buzz outside the Rogers Centre, heading into the final homestand of the season, with the Toronto Blue Jays on the cusp of returning to the postseason.
I like our magic number, and I like the fact that the teams that we're worried about are behind us in the standings.
They got the best players. I see Bichette out there, Springer rocking it. We got this.
Well, Bichette with a high fly ball to left.
Ramirez back, turning and watching, and it is gone.
The Blue Jays currently hold the second of 3 American League wildcard spots and will host division rivals New York Yankees and then Tampa Bay Rays in the final 6 games. The Jays need to win just 3 games to clinch a playoff spot.
They've put themselves in a good spot. If the Jays get to 90 wins, automatically and no matter what. Especially with where the Jays are at right now, they kind of hold their own destiny. They win baseball games, they're going to go to the playoffs. And
Toronto has struggled against AL East opponents, but fans say the postseason is a sure thing.
We're going to go 6 for 6, end up the season right.
I feel like their pitching has been way better than last year. Their players look more ready. They have more veteran players to help with the postseason.
According to Fangraphs.com, the Jays' odds of clinching a wild card spot is 97.8%. If they clinch, these next 6 games will determine whether Toronto finishes in the 2nd or 3rd wild card spot.
If we get the second, apparently it's Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken, and we just proved we can beat them.
If they can face the Twins, that'll be easier for the first round.
you don't really have a preference anymore, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, you're going to have to beat good teams to go to the World Series.
Kevin Gausman will get the start in tonight's series opener against the now eliminated Yankees.
Now some roster news for you. Brandon Belt will be returning to the lineup tonight after being on the 10-day injury list. First pitch goes just after 7. Reporting live outside Rogers Centre, I'm Mike Walker. Michelle, back to you.
It's a massive goal for the Canadians.
Thank you, Mike. And Canada's national women's soccer team will play in front of a sold-out crowd in Toronto tonight, hoping to book their spot in next year's Olympic Games. The Canadian squad beat Jamaica 2-0 on Friday in the first of a 2-game Olympic qualifier. The teams are set to square off again at 7 p.m. at BMO Field. Whichever team scores the most goals over the 2 games will be headed to the 2024 Games in Paris next summer.
A dozen seconds to go. Klingberg across. Down low it goes, Matthews. Klingberg shooting. In front, Marner scores with 4.9 left.
On the ice, the preseason Battle of Ontario continued at Scotiabank Arena last night. Mitch Marner scored to force overtime, but as you saw right there, Ottawa got the last laugh. They beat the Maple Leafs 4-3 in overtime. The Leafs will continue their preseason schedule with a game against the Buffalo Sabres tomorrow night.
And the star power for the 2023 Grey Cup in Hamilton won't be limited to the players on the field. Country music star Carrie Underwood will take the stage at the First Ontario Centre on November 17th. The Grey Cup is set to be played at Tim Hortons Field on November 19th. Underwood last performed in Hamilton in 2016. Pre-sale access to tickets for all Grey Cup Music Festival concerts will be open first to game ticket holders. Tickets for the general public will go on sale on September 30th.
Tonight, an Ontario doctor's legal battle against his own hospital. His fight to find out why he was investigated for alleged patient homicide and why he still has no details despite being cleared. That exclusive and more later on CTV National News.
A new television show is surprising Canadians, turning an ordinary day into an extraordinary one.
It's called The Take Back and will air on CTV, a division of Bell Media. As CTV's Andrea Case explains, it's giving people a second chance, a rare opportunity for a do-over.
Kisa Kay knew something special was going on when she arrived at the Bentway on Fort York Boulevard. After an injury ended her basketball career, the former varsity player with dreams of a professional career created Hoop Queens, Canada's only professional basketball league and junior program for women and girls aged 4 to 35. But when it came to her big inaugural fundraising event, the pandemic struck. This is where The Take Back comes in. The TV show currently in production hosted a fundraiser for Kisa Kay and Hoop Queens.
Feeling amazing right now. During COVID, it was, very up and down. We didn't know what to do. We finally, got our launch. This is our official launch party. And I'm hoping that the city and the world and Canada and everybody knows that we're here to stay. And this is it's just amazing to see the community come out and support men, women, child, everybody.
In attendance, special guests including Cheryl Swoops, the 3-time Olympic gold medalist, the first player to sign with the Women's National Basketball Association, and basketball ambassador.
So I'm going to start by saying this. Toronto needs a WNBA team.
How about that? But for me to be here today, it ain't about me. It's always about passing the torch and uplifting and inspiring women. And I'm so honored that I was even asked to come and celebrate this moment for Kisa, because it's very special.
TSN basketball analyst Kayla Gray has been a fan of the game all her life.
It teaches you so many skills, how to team build, how to advocate for yourself. So to have it in this form is important because women deserve the exact same respect that men have. And the proof is in the pudding. The audience shows up, the appetite is there, but most importantly, the product is amazing, and there is no disputing that. So that is why women's sports is so important, to uplift and amplify.
The premiere episode of The Take Back will air in December during the holiday season, right here on CTV. Okay, with my skills, they won't be asking me to play for Hoop Queens anytime soon, but very soon, the women and girls of Hoop Queens will be playing on this court. It is a gift to the organization. For CTV News, I'm Andrea Case.
Oh, she has skills. Wonderful, Andrea. Well, we're certainly not taking back this weather forecast. It's amazing.
No, we're holding on to this one, I think, just about everyone. Beginning with this evening, very pleasant. We've got some cloud out there right now. Temperature-wise, we're a little bit milder than where we expect to be at this time of year. Here's one more look at the satellite and radar. No wet weather in the forecast for tonight, and our overnight low is going to be around 13 degrees. That's still quite comfortable. In fact, this evening looks great if you want to head out for maybe a stroll around your neighborhood. Tomorrow, great-looking day, mix of sun and cloud, 20 degrees. A little more cloud in the morning. That is expected to clear in the afternoon. It's this long-range forecast, though, that I think has everyone talking. It is going to be hot the first couple of days of October, and no measurable rainfall in sight. Michelle and Raheem.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, that's it for us, but be sure to join Omar Sachedina tonight at 11 for CTV National News, followed by our Zoraida Allman with our next local newscast at 11:30.
In the meantime, our coverage continues anytime on CP24 and online at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Lindsay Morrison and all of us here at CTV News, thank you for watching and have a great night.